Hello and welcome to the Darby Creek Diaries. I'm Gail Thompson, and in case you haven't been here for a bit, I had shoulder surgery, so I'm not real able to craft, and I've been wanting to make a list of some of the really useful tools that if somebody's starting out or even a long-time crafter could use, and this seemed like a great time to do it. The first thing I'd like to suggest is don't pick anything like stamps, inks, dyes, and the like, because it's kind of like clothes and underwear. Just because somebody likes to craft, they don't have the same taste in ink colors, paper colors, stamping styles. So it's best to kind of stick with the basics, and that way you know you're safe and they won't be stuck with something that they're not going to use. Now, everybody that stamps pretty much is going to have to use ink, and sometimes they emboss. That was what actually got me into stamping. You can always use a good white pigment ink. It's something that there are many techniques you can use with it, and you can't go wrong. You also can't have enough black ink. There are dye ink and pigment ink. I'm not going to have an exhaustive list here, or we would be here all day. But one good example is the VersaFine Clair in Nocturne. You can do a lot of techniques with that. You can emboss with it because it's a pigment ink. And then a universally needed one is Versamark, which is a watermark pad. And it puts a clear sticky ink on the paper, and then you can emboss with it, and it puts a little watermark on there, and everybody can use it. And then the embossing powders, there's some clear. It's very inexpensive, maybe $5, and it doesn't go bad, and you can never have too much of it. And then here is a heat it tool, and this is a lower temperature heating thing. It's not as great for embossing as it is for drying if you do watercolors. And then here's an embossing tool, and this gets super, super hot. And the faster you can emboss paper, the less warping you have. Now we have something that we didn't have back in the dark ages when I started in the 90s, but these are MISTI tools. This is the miniature one. I would suggest getting the regular size because I use this because it's small for cameras. But I wanted to show you a real quick embossing job in case you have never done it before, and to show you how some of these supplies work. I'm just taking a black piece of cardstock, and I'm using the sticky grid from Sizzix. It has a little bit of tack on it so that it'll hold your paper down. The MISTIs come with magnets, but I find that they kind of get in the way, so I prefer to use a sticky grid. And then there's our anti-static powder, which is very important because you don't want embossing flakes all over the place. And then Simon Says Stamp came out with this great grid that helps you line up, because there's nothing worse than crooked stamps. So you can just line this up on the plastic, set it down, and you'll be able to pick the stamp up and it'll stay in just the right spot. Then you pull that off because there's no way to see the grid if you've got paper below. It just makes this a game changer for me. Now I'm going to take a cloth and I'm going to kind of season the stamp. Those stamps, they have a little bit of a residue on them, so you want to make sure to kind of rough them up a little bit so that they'll take the ink the first time that you use them. And that is the first time I've used this one. And I'm going to go ahead and ink it up with some VersaFine clear ink that we talked about at the beginning. And the great thing about this is if you don't have all the ink, or the stamp just didn't take the ink great, you can restamp it and it'll stay in the exact same place. I'm just doing it once because I want to show you another product, and so I thought about stamping it twice, but then I didn't. So I'm taking this out, and you'll be able to see the word believe here. But first I'm going to put the release paper back on my sticky grid. I'm trying to do everything left-handed because my right shoulder was the one replaced. So I'm sorry if it's a little wonky looking. Now I'm getting out the white embossing powder. I use Hero Arts and Wow and Ranger. So I think that's probably a mix because I go through more white than anything. So since I had that anti-static tool on, there's not a whole lot of stray bits of embossing powder, and it's really quite annoying. Black is it, and with the white shows up just as much as the white on the black does. And so that's that anti-static powder tool. It's less than $1, I think, or maybe less than $2. So if you look at this Believe, I'm going to pick out the little stray pieces here real quick. But if you look at this Believe here in a second, you'll see on the B that I didn't get as much embossing powder there. There wasn't enough ink there. But I'm going to go ahead and heat set it with my embossing gun, not the heat tool. Although the heat tool would work, it just takes longer. But just look at how that just pops, except for that B. And it's got that little bit of, a boo-boo. And I would have restamped it, but I wanted to show you how you can fix this. You could put it back in the MISTI because the stamp was still there and still in the same place. But a quicker way to do it is to use a white jelly roll pen. And that is great for just kind of, doing all the mistakes. And it's very inexpensive as well. And it's great for highlights on eyes and things. Sometimes you have to work on them a little bit to get them started, especially if they're cold. But I love mine, and look how bright it writes on the black paper. And here's what the pen looks like. Cutting tools are very important to any paper crafter, and we need kind of an assortment. The first would be a paper trimmer. I like this Fiskars one because it's a rail trimmer. I've had some trimmers that just didn't cut a straight line. They were on a wire, the blade was on a wire, and if you put too much pressure, it'd go wonky. This one does a lot better, and it also takes a lot bigger piece of paper than most of them. So this is the one that I go to the most. I also have a couple guillotine trimmers, but I find that I can measure out things better with that. Now we go to scissors. These little cutter bee scissors, I know they're under $10, are great for fussy cutting. I know some people don't like to fussy cut, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And I love the Holtz Tonic ones because they're Teflon, and so the sticky tapes and things don't stick. However, I would recommend getting the long pair. The Tonic shear would be the length that I would get. I think that's like 9 inches or 7 inches. But I do love me some good scissors. Next, we'll do die cutting. That is a real game changer, and you can make so many things with it. Now, this is a manual cutter. I have a very, very old Sizzix manual cutter, and since it ain't broke, I don't feel like I need to buy a new one, but if I were, I would get this Spellbinders Platinum Plus. I love how you can fold it up and get it out of the way, which I cannot with my Sizzix. And it works with lots of tools, and it also works with a glimmer machine, but we're not going to go into that because that's a little advanced, and we're trying to keep this a nice, simple, useful list. If I go off on a tangent, I'll never come back. However, I do have this Gemini Junior. It is an electronic die cutter. It is great if you have arthritis like I did and probably always will have. It makes die cutting super, super quick, and I love it, and that's my most used tool, I'm pretty sure, in my craft room. Now, also, some rectangular dies are a must. You want your ends to look finished. This has a stitched border. There are lots of ones that have other borders, but the stitched one's nice and basic, but it gives you a little bit of something, something to your squares. I've had this tool-in-one for many, many, many years. It has other parts like rollers and things that I don't have, and it comes apart and you can just store everything in it. It's got a pokey tool. I've got something stuck in it right now. And it's got the little brush tool. That is fabulous for getting the little tiny dots out of dies that when you cut them, sometimes they'll leave little places and you can just scoop it off. And then also the little pointy tool gets out the little nooks and crannies too. So I love that, and it's also inexpensive. And Boy, do we crafters use sticky stuff. This is kind of a generalized category. I'm starting off with Masking Magic. It has release paper on the back and you can stamp on it and then peel it off, and you have a little thing to cover so that you can put objects behind what you're stamping. Like this hat, I stamped the hat, and this is a piece of Masking Magic going right over the top. Now I'm going to, and it's the exact same size, you want to trim it right down to the edge. Now I'm going to put my little ghost there, just stamp him on. And instead of having the hat with the big ghost head on it, you pull that Stamping Magic off and there you go. Also, these little 3D foam squares, I love them. They are great for tight spaces. And if you cut them on the paper like that, you can, it's a lot easier for them to cut. But that is what they look like used on a card underneath the little snowman there. Super, super useful, and they come in black as well. Then some double stick score tape. That stuff, once it sticks, you're done. It is very, very powerful, strong, I guess is the word I want. Then we have this see-through tape, and this is great for putting on your dies to run through the die cutter. It comes off and it doesn't mess up your paper like some other things. And then this glue I just love. There are lots of really good glues, but I love this one. I love you can buy the needle tip, and you can get in the really tight places. This dries matte and it is super, super strong. Now, Glossy Accents is not, it's a glue, you can use it as a glue, but it does not dry matte, it dries glossy. And you can also put it on top of paper to give it that shiny look. So I use it for that most of the time. Now we get into paper, the most important part of a paper crafter. I could not live without my Hero Arts Midnight Black cardstock. It is the thickest, blackest, darkest cardstock I have ever seen. Now this is the weight of a normal piece of paper. So then this is the weight of the Hero Arts cardstock. Not Your Mama's cardstock is super, super heavy, 130 pounds. I use it for my card bases. It's great for all the techniques, and that tends to be my go-to paper, though you could use Nina Solar White, and there's lots of other brands. This is sort of a catch-all category. I want to talk about my Waffle Flower water media mat. I love it. It's great for camera work too because it shows you, but it also has all those edges, and you can put a stencil in there and not have to tape it down. And the paper doesn't move easily, it grips to it. And another cool thing is you can also fold your cardstock on it because you've got an edge right there, and then I just use a Teflon bone folder to crease it. You want a Teflon one because it doesn't leave marks on the paper. Then I like to glitz things up with a Nuvo glitter gloss. That was a new pen there. So I'm just showing you how to get it flowing. There's that little yellow band you need to take off, and then you pop the top back on and it cuts through to the other side. Now I squeezed this a lot to get it going, so I kind of squeezed it too much, but that's what the gloss looks like, and the paper will dry underneath. Memento Tuxedo Black pen is also my go-to pen. If I'm using black ink, this is just a sample. I just run it along the edge of white cardstock that I've stamped with a black image. I just think it looks like a more finished thing. And it's also great for correcting little stamping boo-boos if you stamp in black. A tea roller is super, super cheap, under a couple of bucks, and it's a necessity so that you can get your sentiment strips straight on your cardstock. Wouldn't live without one. And then a scoring board. This is a very old Martha Stewart scoring board, and I don't care for it because I think it's just a little off when you fold. But I have suggested some other ones at the bottom. And you just go to your measurements, 4 1/4, which is a typical A2 card, and you score it, and it leaves a nice little line there. And then you just fold it backwards, and there's your card base. Now, crafting can be a messy proposition, so I have a couple of Ranger Teflon mats that I use, and I'm picking off some paint or something off of that so that you could see things come off of it fairly well. And the reverse tweezers are very handy for lots of things. You can hold on to things while you're embossing like I did earlier, or you can put little embellishments on. I hope you enjoyed this little list of practical gift items for the favorite crafter in your life or for yourself. The supplies are linked below. I hope that you will follow me on all the social media, like and subscribe here. And I'm going to leave you some other videos to view. Until next time, have a great holiday season, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.